The crystal towers of New Zephyros gleamed in the pale orange light of the twin suns. Elder Veltar stood at the highest observation deck, watching the beautiful city that his people had built over 3 centuries. The delicate spires reached toward the sky like frozen music, each one humming with the soft harmonics that his kind found so peaceful. But today, there was no peace. Dark shapes moved across the horizon. They looked like a black tide washing over the land, consuming everything in their path. The Void Devourers had come to Kepler 442b, and they were hungry. Veltar's crystalline form shimmered with distress. His people, the Zephyrians, had never known war. They were builders, creators, dreamers. For thousands of years, they had turned dead worlds into gardens. Their technology could make rivers flow and forests grow where nothing had lived before. They were proud of this gift. Now that gift meant nothing against the creatures that wanted to eat their world. Elder, called Keeper Zixtal from the communication chamber below. The outer settlements have gone silent. All of them. Veltar closed his eyes. 300,000 Zephyrians lived in those settlements. Had lived. The Void Devourers left nothing behind when they fed. No buildings, no plants, no ground. Just empty space where life used to be. He moved down the crystal steps to the communication center. Banks of quantum transmitters lined the walls, their soft blue glow the only light in the room. These machines could send messages across the galaxy in seconds. Today they would carry the most important message his people had ever sent. "Show me the recordings from Settlement 7, Veltar said. The holographic display came to life. It showed the last moments of the settlement before it went dark. The Void Devourers looked like living shadow, flowing across the ground like water, but this water had teeth and claws and an endless hunger. They tore through the settlement's energy shields as if they were made of paper. The Zephyrians had tried to fight. Their defense system shot beams of pure energy at the creatures. The beams passed right through them. Their shield generators created walls of force. The Devourers simply absorbed the energy and grew stronger. In less than 20 minutes, Settlement 7 was gone. Not destroyed, gone. The very ground had been eaten away, leaving a perfectly round hole in the planet's surface. "How long until they reach the capital?" Veltar asked. "At their current speed, 4 days, Zixtal replied. "Maybe less if they move faster after feeding. 4 days. Veltar felt the weight of his people's survival pressing down on him. The Zephyrians had no weapons of war. They had tried to build some after the first attacks, but their entire civilization was based on creation, not destruction. They didn't even understand how to make something meant only to kill. "Open channels to the Galactic Council," he ordered. "Send the emergency beacon on all frequencies." The quantum transmitters hummed to life. Veltar stood before the main projector, knowing that his image would appear in the council chambers of every major civilization in the galaxy. "My name is Elder Veltar of the Zephyrian Republic," he began. "Our world is under attack by the Void Devourers. We are a peaceful people. We have no military, no weapons of war. We need help. Please, anyone who can hear this message, we need help." He paused, looking directly into the recorder. "We have been members of the galactic community for 800 years. We have shared our terraforming technology freely. We have helped build gardens on 1,000 dead worlds. We have never asked for anything in return. Now we ask for help. Our children are dying. Our world is being consumed. Please help us." The message went out across the galaxy. Then they waited. The first response came from the Altarian Empire. Their ambassador appeared on the screen, tall and proud in his golden robes. "The Empire has reviewed your situation," he said in his cold voice. "We regret to inform you that we cannot spare military resources for your sector at this time. We recommend immediate evacuation to designated refugee centers." Refugee centers. Veltar knew what that meant. The Zephyrians would be scattered across a dozen worlds, their culture broken, their people reduced to begging for scraps from others. The next response came from the Drakmor Confederation. They were warriors. Surely they would understand. But their message was even worse. "The Zephyrian system is strategically unimportant. Military intervention is not cost-effective. Suggest abandoning the sector." One by one, the responses came in. The ethereal collective who had been their friends for centuries sent their regrets. The Scientific Union was busy with important research. The Trade Federation was concerned about their shipping routes. Everyone had an excuse. Everyone had a reason why they couldn't help. "Elder," Zixtal said quietly, The Devourers have taken Settlement 5. They're moving faster now. 3 days, maybe less. Veltar stood in the empty communication chamber and felt truly alone for the first time in his long life. Outside, he could hear his people singing. It was an old song, one their ancestors had sung when they first saw the stars. They sang of hope and distant light, but the stars were cold and no light was coming to save them. He activated the transmitter one more time. This would be their final message, he knew. By tomorrow, the Devourers would be close enough to disrupt their communications. "This is Elder Veltar of New Zephyros," he said. "To anyone listening, this is our final call for help. We are 3 million souls who have never harmed anyone. We have given our gifts freely to the galaxy. We have built beauty where there was emptiness. We have shared our knowledge with all who asked." His voice cracked slightly. "Now darkness comes to eat our world and we stand alone. The great powers of the galaxy have turned away. They call us unimportant. They say we are not worth saving." He looked out the window at his beautiful city, at the crystal spires that would soon be nothing but empty space. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps we are just 3 million unimportant lives on one small world. But we lived, we loved. We built something beautiful. If anyone remembers us, remember that we tried to make the galaxy a little brighter. The transmission ended. Veltar walked to the window and watched the sun set behind the mountains. Tomorrow would bring the second sunset. The day after that, if they were lucky, they might see a third. Then the Void Devourers would come for New Zephyros, and the last light of the Zephyrian people would go out forever. In the distance, parents called their children home for the evening. Somewhere, someone was playing music. Life continued even at the end of the world because that was what living beings did. They hoped even when hope was gone. Veltar pressed his crystal hand against the cool window and whispered a prayer to the stars. Not for salvation, that was beyond hope now. Just that someone somewhere would remember that the Zephyrians had existed, that they had mattered, even if only to themselves. The stars glittered in the alien sky, beautiful and distant and silent. But sometimes, in the vast darkness of space, the smallest lights shine the brightest. 3 days had passed since the final transmission. Elder Veltar stood in the same observation chamber, but everything had changed. The crystal city below was half empty. Most of his people had gathered in the central districts, hoping that being together would somehow make the end easier. The Void Devourers were close now. Veltar could see them in the distance, a dark line moving across the horizon like a storm made of hunger. They had consumed everything in their path. Where green fields and silver lakes had sparkled yesterday, now there was only empty air and the hollow ground left behind. Settlement 3 had died that morning. 2 million Zephyrians lived there. Had lived there. The communication stopped mid-sentence when the Devourers reached the town center. One moment there were voices calling for help. The next moment, silence. "Elder," Keeper Zixtal called from below. "You should see this." Veltar didn't want to see anything else. He had watched his world die for 3 days. How much more could his heart take? But duty called even at the end. He walked down to the communication chamber. "What is it?" he asked. Zixtal was staring at the quantum receiver with confusion. "We're getting a signal. It's not using quantum transmission. It's using old electromagnetic waves. Very basic technology. Show me." The display came to life, but the image was strange. Instead of the usual perfect hologram, this looked rough and pixelated. A face appeared on the screen. It was alien, but not like any species Veltar knew. The skin was pink-brown with small eyes and strange fur growing only on the top of its head. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Indomitable," the creature said. The voice was rough, unlike the musical tones of most civilized species. "We received your distress call. Human fleet is en route. Hold your position." The transmission ended. Veltar stared at the empty screen. "Human?" he said. Did it say human? Zixtal was checking the galactic database. Humans. Yes, here they are. Species designation Terran human, recently discovered. They've only been in space for about 200 years. No major territory. No advanced technology. The Council hasn't even given them full membership yet. And they're coming here? It seems so. But Elder, look at this. Zixtal brought up the human entry in the galactic records. They're listed as technologically primitive. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are basic. They have no experience with the Void Devourers. Veltar felt a strange emotion. It wasn't hope exactly. How could these primitive newcomers succeed where the great powers of the galaxy had failed? But it was something. Someone had answered their call. Someone was coming. How long until they arrive? He asked. Zixtal was running calculations. If they're using standard faster-than-light drives and if they started from their nearest colony, 18 hours, maybe 20, too long. The Devourers would reach the city in 12 hours. Feltar could see them now with the naked eye, a dark tide flowing toward them. In the strange way of their kind, they seemed to be taking their time savoring the fear of their prey. Should we tell the people? Zixtal asked. Feltar thought about it. Should he give his people false hope? These humans were strangers. They had no reason to die for Zephyrians they had never met. They probably didn't even understand what they were flying into. But then he remembered something. In all the responses from the great civilizations, not one had asked about the Zephyrians themselves. They had talked about strategic value and resource allocation and cost-benefit analysis. None had mentioned that 3 million living beings were about to die. This human captain had said 5 words that all the mighty empires had forgotten. We received your distress call. Tell them, Veltar said. Tell them someone is coming. The news spread through the city like light through crystal. People began to sing again. Not the sad songs of farewell they had been singing for 3 days, but the old songs of hope. Children who had been hiding came out to play in the streets. For a few hours, New Zephyros felt alive again, but the hours passed and the Devourers came closer. Veltar watched them from his tower. He had studied the recordings from the other settlements. The creatures moved like a living shadow, flowing around obstacles, consuming everything they touched. They made no sound. They seemed to have no individual forms, just a mass of hungry darkness. The city's defense grid powered up. Energy cannons rose from hidden bunkers. Shield generators hummed to life. The Zephyrians knew their weapons wouldn't work, but they had to try. They couldn't just stand and wait to be eaten. 8 hours until the attack. Still no sign of the humans. Elder, Zixtal called. I'm detecting ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. 17 vessels. They're not what I expected. The display showed the human fleet. Veltar had seen ships from every major civilization in the galaxy. They were usually beautiful things, sleek and graceful, looking more like art than weapons. These human ships looked like tools. They were angular and blocky, covered in thick armor plating. Strange weapons stuck out from their hulls like spines on a battle beast. They looked so aggressive, Zixtal whispered. A new transmission came through. The same rough electromagnetic waves, but this time the image was clearer. An older human appeared on the screen. His face was scarred and his eyes held the weight of many battles. Zephyrian survivors, this is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Human Defense Fleet. We're going to get you out of there. I need you to listen carefully. We've fought these Void Devourers before. They're tough, but they're not unstoppable. We're going to hit them hard and fast while you evacuate your people to our ships. Do you understand? Veltar found his voice. Admiral Webb, we are grateful beyond words. But there are 3 million of us. You only have 17 ships? The human smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Son, we once evacuated 4 million people from a dying star with half this many ships. We'll make it work. Just keep your people ready to move when we give the signal. The transmission ended. Veltar felt something he hadn't felt in days. It wasn't hope exactly. It was something harder and more practical. It was the feeling that someone with a plan had arrived. Outside, the Void Devourers were less than an hour from the city. Their dark mass stretched across the horizon, a tide of hunger that had consumed worlds. But above them, 17 human ships moved into position. They were small and ugly and primitive by galactic standards. They had come from the other side of the galaxy to save people they had never met. As Veltar watched, the lead ship opened fire. The weapons weren't energy beams or particle streams. They were solid chunks of metal moving very, very fast. The Devourers had never seen anything like them. For the first time in 3 days, Veltar allowed himself to hope. Not because he thought they would survive. The odds were still impossible. But because someone had come, someone had heard their call and answered. In all the galaxy, among all the great and mighty civilizations, only the humans had remembered what it meant to help. That was worth something. That was worth everything. The first human missile hit the Void Devourers like a hammer striking water. The dark mass rippled and twisted, parts of it dissolving into nothing. But it wasn't the elegant energy weapons that other species used. This was something crude and violent, a chunk of metal and explosives moving faster than sound. Elder Veltar watched from his tower as more missiles rained down. The Devourers had never faced weapons like these. They had evolved to absorb energy, to feed on the sophisticated attacks of advanced civilizations. But the humans were throwing rocks. Very fast, very explosive rocks. Direct hit on the primary mass, reported Keeper Zixtal. They're taking damage. Real damage. Admiral Webb's voice crackled over the communication system. All ships commence attack pattern Alpha. Remember, these things eat energy for breakfast, so feed them metal instead. The human fleet dove toward the planet's surface. Their ships were nothing like the graceful vessels of other species. They moved like predators, fast and direct with no wasted motion. As they flew, they launched wave after wave of kinetic weapons. The Void Devourers tried to adapt. Parts of their mass rose into the air, reaching for the attacking ships like grasping fingers, but the humans were ready for that too. Incoming tendrils, called Captain Chen from her ship. All units, evasive maneuvers. The human ships scattered like a flock of birds, each one moving in a different direction. The Devourers' reaching arms found only empty space. Meanwhile, the humans regrouped and attacked from a new angle. They're not fighting like any military force I've seen, Zixtal observed. There's no formation, no standard tactics. Veltar understood. The humans weren't following a textbook. They were adapting on the fly, learning from each attack, changing their strategy based on what worked. It was chaotic and unpredictable. The Devourers couldn't counter it because it made no sense. Captain Chen, Admiral Webb's voice called. Take your squadron and hit the eastern flank. Draw their attention while we set up for the main assault. Copy that, Admiral. Remember, folks, we're not trying to win a beauty contest here. Make it loud, make it messy. Chen's ships peeled off from the main group. They flew low over the Zephyrian city, so close that Veltar could see the scorch marks on their hulls. These ships had been in battles before. They looked like they had been through hell and kept flying. The Devourers took the bait. A large portion of their mass flowed toward Chen's squadron, leaving their main body exposed. The humans had tricked them. Now, Admiral Webb shouted. All remaining ships target the core mass. Give them everything we've got. The sky lit up with explosions. The humans weren't just using missiles now. They had nuclear weapons, plasma charges, and things Veltar couldn't even identify. One ship actually flew directly into the Devourer mass and exploded, taking a huge chunk of the enemy with it. The destroyer Valor is down, came a report. Direct hit to the reactor. Did the crew make it out? Webb asked. Negative, sir. They stayed at their posts to the end. There was a moment of silence on the communication channel. Then Webb's voice came back harder than before. Then we make sure their sacrifice means something. All ships continue the attack. The humans kept fighting. Even when their ships were damaged, even when their friends died, they kept fighting. Veltar had never seen anything like it. The great civilizations of the galaxy fought with detachment, using long-range weapons and careful strategies. These humans fought like their lives depended on it. Like everyone's life depended on it. Elder, Zixtal called urgently. Captain Chen is requesting permission to land in the city center. She wants to start evacuating civilians. Now, in the middle of the battle? She says they can't wait. The Devourers are adapting to their attacks. They need to get people out while they still can. Veltar looked down at his city. The crystal spires were beautiful, but they were just buildings. His people were what mattered. Give her permission. 3 human transport ships landed in the main plaza, their engines still hot from the battle. The doors opened and humans poured out. They were wearing heavy armor and carrying weapons, but their first action wasn't to fight. It was to help. Veltar watched from above as human soldiers guided Zephyrian families onto the ships. They were so different from each other. The humans short and stocky and aggressive, the Zephyrians tall and delicate and crystalline. But it didn't matter. The humans treated every Zephyrian life as precious. How many can each ship carry? A human officer asked. 800, maybe 1,000 if we push it, came the reply. Then we push it. Load them up. The evacuation continued even as the battle raged overhead. Human fighters screamed past the crystal towers, chasing fragments of void devourers that had broken off from the main mass. Explosions lit up the sky. Debris rained down on the city. But the humans never stopped working. When a Zephyrian child became separated from her parents, a human marine carried her to safety. When an elderly Zephyrian couldn't walk, two humans made a stretcher from their equipment. When the power failed in one of the transport ships, human engineers worked alongside Zephyrian technicians to get it running again. Transport. 1 is full, reported Captain Chen. Moving to orbit. Transport 2 ready for departure. Transport 3. We've got a problem. Engine failure. Veltar watched as the third transport ship sat helpless on the plaza, loaded with 1,000 Zephyrian refugees. Above them, the battle was turning. The Devourers were learning, adapting. They had started absorbing the kinetic energy from the human weapons. The missiles were becoming less effective. All ships, Admiral Webb ordered, fall back to high orbit. Prepare for evacuation. But Captain Chen's voice cut through the communication channel. Negative, Admiral. We've got 1,500 people on that broken transport. We're not leaving without them. Captain, that's an order. With respect, sir, stuff your order. We came here to save people. We're going to save people. Veltar felt his crystalline heart racing. The humans were willing to die for strangers. All of them. Not just the soldiers, but the engineers, the medics, the pilots. They had come across the galaxy to save people they had never met, and they would not abandon them now. All right, Admiral Webb said, and Veltar could hear the pride in his voice. All ships maintain position. We're not leaving anyone behind. The battle continued. Human ships fell from the sky, their crews fighting to the last breath. But more transports landed. More refugees were saved. The humans never stopped, never gave up, never even slowed down. Commander Jake Morrison's fighter was hit by a Devourer tendril. His ship was spinning out of control, systems failing, but he didn't eject. Instead, he pointed his damaged fighter at the largest concentration of enemies and pushed his engines to full power. Tell my kids their dad went out. Swinging came his final transmission. The explosion was visible from orbit. When the light faded, a massive section of the Devourer swarm was simply gone. Morrison had taken them with him, buying precious time for the evacuation. As Veltar watched his people being carried to safety, he understood something about these strange, primitive newcomers. They might not have the most advanced technology. They might not be the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but they were the bravest, and sometimes courage was the most advanced technology of all. The evacuation was over, but the cost had been terrible. Elder Veltar stood on the bridge of the human flagship, looking out at what remained of the rescue fleet. Of the 17 ships that had arrived with such fierce determination, only 8 were still space-worthy. The others drifted as burning hulks or had been completely destroyed. The Void Devourers were gone, scattered and broken by the humans' unexpected tactics. But they had taken so much with them. Commander Morrison was dead. The crew of the destroyer Valor was gone. Hundreds of other humans had given their lives for people they had never met. Final count, Admiral, reported a young human officer. 2.7 million Zephyrian civilians evacuated successfully. We lost the Valor, the Defiance, the Courage, and 6 smaller ships. 437 human casualties. Admiral Webb nodded grimly. His face showed the weight of every lost life. And the Zephyrians? 300,000 unaccounted for. Most were in the outer settlements that fell before we arrived. Veltar felt each number like a crystal shard in his heart. 300,000 of his people gone forever, but 2.7 million were alive because these humans had chosen to help. The mathematics of sacrifice were complicated and painful. Admiral, Veltar said quietly, I don't know how to thank you. You lost so much to save us. Webb turned to look at him. The human's eyes were tired, but there was no regret in them. Elder, we didn't lose anything. We spent lives to save lives. That's what we do. That's what anyone should do. But your people died for strangers. No, Webb said firmly. My people died for friends they hadn't met yet. Around them, the rescue operation continued. Human medical teams worked alongside Zephyrian healers, treating the wounded from both species. The cultural differences were huge. Humans were loud and direct, while Zephyrians communicated in gentle harmonics, but somehow they understood each other. Veltar watched a human doctor named Rodriguez working on an injured Zephyrian child. The doctor had never seen Zephyrian physiology before, but he was learning fast, asking questions and adapting his techniques. When the child's crystal structure began to crack from stress, Rodriguez figured out how to stabilize it using human biofoam and Zephyrian harmonic therapy. Your medicine is so different from ours, the Zephyrian healer observed. But it works. Different doesn't mean wrong, Rodriguez replied, carefully sealing a fracture. We just need to find ways to make it work together. In the engineering sections, the cooperation was even more remarkable. Lieutenant Sarah Park had somehow figured out how to link human power cores with Zephyrian crystal matrices. The hybrid systems worked better than either technology alone. How did you know to try this? Asked Engineer Meltar, watching Park's rough human tools create perfect connections with delicate Zephyrian crystals. I didn't, Park admitted. But when something's broken, you try everything until you find what fixes it. Your crystals store energy beautifully, but they need a rougher power source than your people usually make. Our reactors are rough. Sometimes rough is what you need. The cooperation wasn't without problems. Humans ate different food, breathed different air, and needed different sleeping schedules. The Zephyrians found human behavior chaotic and sometimes frightening. The humans found Zephyrian customs confusing and overly formal, but they made it work. When the refugee ship's life support couldn't handle both species, the humans shared their air recyclers. When the Zephyrians couldn't eat human food, they used their bioshaping skills to create nourishment for both groups. Every problem became a puzzle to solve together. Then the Galactic Council arrived. Ambassador Thylex of the Altarian Empire came aboard the flagship with great ceremony. He wore golden robes and traveled with an escort of 12 guards. His manner was cold and disapproving as he addressed Admiral Webb. Admiral, the Council has reviewed your actions in this sector. We are here to discuss the serious violations of interstellar law that have occurred. Webb looked at the ambassador with the same expression he might use to examine something unpleasant on his boot. Violations? You conducted military operations in neutral space without Council approval. You engaged unknown hostile forces without proper threat assessment. You interfered in the internal affairs of a member species. The list is quite extensive. I saved 3 million people. That is not the point, Thylex said sharply. Proper procedures exist for a reason. The Council has protocols for refugee situations. You should have contacted us first. We did contact you, Veltar said, speaking up from across the bridge. We sent distress calls for days. You said we were not strategically important. Thylex barely glanced at him. The Council's decisions are based on complex factors that primitive species cannot understand. The greater good requires difficult choices. Something in the air changed. Every human on the bridge went very still. Veltar had seen this before, in the moments before the humans attacked the Void Devourers. It was the calm before the storm. Primitive species? Webb said quietly. Well, yes. Humans are barely out of their home system. You lack the wisdom that comes with true civilization. These reckless rescue operations set dangerous precedents. What if every minor species expects the galaxy to come running whenever they have problems? Webb stood up slowly. He wasn't tall compared to the Altarian, but somehow he seemed to fill the room. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're upset because we saved people you were willing to let die? The Council makes decisions based on the greater good. The greater good. Webb's voice was getting quieter, which somehow made it more frightening. Tell me, Ambassador, what's the greater good in letting 3 million innocent people get eaten by monsters? Resources must be allocated wisely. Military assets cannot be risked for every minor crisis. Minor crisis. Webb nodded slowly. I see. Well, let me tell you something about us primitive humans. We have a saying, no one gets left behind. It means that when someone calls for help, you help them. Period. You don't calculate the cost-benefit ratio. You don't worry about setting precedents. You help because it's the right thing to do. Thylex looked around the bridge with obvious distaste. Such emotional thinking is exactly why humans are not ready for galactic leadership. True civilization requires true civilization? Webb interrupted. You want to know what true civilization looks like, Ambassador? It's not your golden robes or your fancy ships. It's Captain Chen flying into hell to save strangers. It's Commander Morrison dying to protect people he'd never met. It's my medics working 36 hours straight to heal wounded Zephyrians. The Admiral stepped closer to the Ambassador. You talk about wisdom and advancement, but when people were dying, where was your wisdom? When children were crying for help, where was your advancement? You sat in your comfortable chambers and made calculations while real beings suffered and died. The Council will hear of this insubordination, Thylex said stiffly. Good, Webb replied. Tell them exactly what happened here. Tell them that when the Zephyrians called for help, every advanced civilization turned away. Tell them that only the primitive humans came. Tell them that we lost 400 good people to save strangers and we'd do it again tomorrow." The ambassador left without another word, his guards following behind. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. "That was unwise," Veltar said gently. "The council has great power." Webb shrugged. "Maybe. But some things are more important than politics. Elder, some things are worth fighting for, even if you can't win." Looking around the bridge, Veltar saw humans and Zephyrians working side by side. Different species, different cultures, different worlds, but united by something deeper than politics or protocol. They were united by the simple idea that when someone needs help, you help them. Maybe the ambassador was right. Maybe the humans were primitive by galactic standards. But if this was what primitive looked like, Veltar thought he preferred it to civilization. 6 months had passed since the evacuation of Kepler 442b. Elder Veltar stood in what used to be a human cargo bay and was now the heart of New Harmony, the first joint human-Zephyrian settlement. Around him, crystal spires grew from metal foundations, creating a beauty that neither species could have achieved alone. The transformation had been remarkable. What began as a desperate refugee situation had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a true partnership between species. The surviving Zephyrians hadn't just been given shelter in human space. They had been welcomed as equals, as family. "The biodome is complete," reported Engineer Park, approaching with her usual grease-stained smile. She wore a crystal pendant that chimed softly with each step, a gift from Zephyrian children who had adopted her as an honorary aunt. "Your people's terraforming technology combined with our industrial systems. We can make a garden anywhere now." Veltar looked through the transparent walls at the impossible sight beyond. Lush forests and crystal formations existed side by side, fed by hybrid power systems that combined human efficiency with Zephyrian elegance. Children of both species played together in gardens that sparkled with bioluminescent plants and hummed with harmonic frequencies. "Any word from the council?" Veltar asked. Park's expression darkened. "They're still making noise about sanctions and trade restrictions. Apparently we're a destabilizing influence on galactic politics." The irony wasn't lost on Veltar. For 6 months, the great powers of the galaxy had been complaining about human recklessness, while quietly dealing with their own problems. The Altarian Empire was facing rebellion in 3 systems. The Drakmor Confederation was losing a war against automated defense systems. The Ethereal Collective had discovered that their entire philosophy was based on a translation error from ancient texts. But while the old powers struggled, something new was growing in the Outer Rim. Species that had been ignored or dismissed by the Council were beginning to reach out to the Human-Zephyrian Alliance. The kelp farmers of Aquatica had sent a delegation. The rock shepherds of the asteroid belt were sharing mining techniques. Even the notorious pirates of the void had offered their services in exchange for citizenship. "The morning briefing is about to start," Park said. "Admiral Webb wants to discuss the situation with the Catherian refugees." Veltar nodded and followed her to the command center. The room itself was a perfect example of what their 2 species could accomplish together. Human tactical displays worked alongside Zephyrian harmonic computers, creating a 3-dimensional map of local space that was both functional and beautiful. Admiral Webb stood at the center, looking as gruff and determined as ever. Around him, humans and Zephyrians worked side by side, their different approaches to problem-solving creating solutions that neither could have found alone. "Status report," Webb said as Veltar arrived. Captain Chen stepped forward. She wore the scars of the Battle of Kepler 442b with pride, and her ship now carried a mixed human-Zephyrian crew. "The Catherians are 3 days out. 2 million refugees in their own ships running from something they call the Iron Plague. No one else will take them." "What does the Council say?" Webb asked. "The usual. Non-interference in internal affairs. Proper channels. Strategic considerations. They're perfectly willing to let 2 million people die rather than risk their precious stability." Webb nodded grimly. "And the Iron Plague?" Dr. Rodriguez looked up from his research station. In 6 months, he had become the galaxy's leading expert on multi-species medicine, learning from every refugee group they encountered. "It's not a disease. It's a nanotech swarm that converts organic matter into machinery. The Catherians built it as a mining tool centuries ago. Now it's out of control and converting their entire planet. Can we stop it? Maybe. The Zephyrians' bioharmonics might be able to disrupt the nanotech's programming. But we'd need to get close to the source. That means going to the Cytherian homeworld, Chen observed. Into the middle of a tech plague that converts everything it touches. Sounds like Tuesday, someone said from the back of the room. There were a few chuckles. The humans had developed a reputation for charging into impossible situations with a smile and a prayer. But Veltar saw something deeper in their planning. They weren't just being reckless. Every rescue operation was carefully planned, every risk calculated. The humans fought smart as well as hard. They had learned from their Zephyrian partners, just as the Zephyrians had learned from them. The Council won't like this, Webb said. If we save the Cytherians, more species will start coming to us instead of going through proper channels. Good, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see former Ambassador Zindar of the Ethereal Collective, who had resigned his position to join the Alliance. The proper channels are corrupt and broken. The Council cares more about maintaining power than protecting life. Zindar had been the first high-ranking official from a major civilization to defect to the Alliance. His resignation had caused a scandal that was still reverberating through the galactic government. But he had no regrets. I spent 300 years believing that wisdom came with age, he continued. That advancement meant leaving behind primitive emotions like compassion and courage. I was wrong. The humans are right. Sometimes the most advanced thing you can do is help someone who needs help. Webb looked around the room. All in favor of accepting the Cytherian refugees and dealing with their iron plague problem? Every hand went up. Human, Zephyrian, and ethereal alike. The vote was unanimous. Then we go, Webb said. Chen, prep the fleet. Rodriguez, work with the Zephyrians on a solution to the nanotech problem. Everyone else, let's save some people. As the meeting broke up, Veltar remained behind with Admiral Webb. The human was studying the tactical display, already planning their next impossible mission. Admiral, Veltar said, the Council is going to escalate this. They can't allow us to keep undermining their authority. I know, Webb replied. They'll probably send a fleet eventually. Try to force us back into line. And when they do, Webb looked at him with a slight smile. Elder, 6 months ago you called for help and only we answered. Now you're asking if we'll abandon you when things get tough. What do you think? Veltar felt the harmonic vibration of contentment resonate through his crystal structure. He had his answer. Later that day, Veltar stood before the Galactic Council one final time. The great chamber was as magnificent as ever, filled with representatives from 1,000 worlds. But it felt empty to him now, like a beautiful shell with nothing inside. Honored Council, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I stand before you to formally withdraw the Zephyrian Republic from galactic membership. The reaction was immediate. Voices rose in anger and surprise. Ambassador Thylak stood up, his golden robes rustling with indignation. You cannot simply leave the Council, he declared. There are procedures, agreements, obligations. Obligations? Veltar's voice cut through the noise like crystal through shadow. You speak of obligations? Where were your obligations when my people were dying? Where were your agreements when 3 million souls called for help? The chamber fell silent. You taught us that wisdom comes with age, Veltar continued. That advancement means leaving behind primitive impulses. You pride yourselves on sophisticated solutions and refined sensibilities. But when death came for us, your wisdom became paralysis. Your advancement became apathy. Your sophistication became an excuse for cowardice. He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Only the primitive humans came. Only they were willing to bleed for strangers. Only they remembered that beneath all our technologies and philosophies, the measure of a species is simple. Do you help when help is needed? Veltar turned toward the exit, then stopped. The Zephyrian Republic is dead. It died with our homeworld, but something new has been born in its place. We are the Human Zephyrian Alliance now, and we welcome all who believe that civilization means more than just advanced technology. We welcome all who understand that true progress is measured not by the height of your towers, but by your willingness to help others build theirs. He walked out of the chamber without looking back. Behind him, the council erupted in arguments and recriminations, but Veltar felt only peace. 3 days later, he stood on the observation deck of the Alliance flagship, watching as the Cytherian refugee fleet approached. 2 million souls in desperate need of help, fleeing a disaster of their own making. Ready to go save some people? Admiral Webb asked, joining him at the window. Veltar looked at the approaching ships, then at the mixed human-Zephyrian crew preparing for another impossible mission. Around them, the crystalline spires of New Harmony gleamed in the light of an alien star, proof that different species could build something beautiful together. Always, he replied. In the distance, more ships were approaching. Word was spreading through the galaxy about a place where help was given freely, where courage mattered more than politics, where no one was left behind. The old order was crumbling, one rescue at a time. In its place, something better was being born, something that remembered what civilization was really supposed to mean.